Kerrigan, I'm thinking about today ethics, socializing, interaction of people in the occult, witchcraft, and Alexandrian tradition, because they're all very similar when you think about it. Most occult studies do involve, or the opportunity to involve, some meetings, whether it be a ritual lodge or a study group or a coven. There are people. Sometimes we wish it was just us and the gods, but there are other people there, and we have to find ways to interact with the group and the individuals. And so I know that Maxine, in her working of Temple of the Mother witchcraft, recommended the no socializing rule. And we talked about it briefly before, but I want to ask some real deep questions today about it and think about it more deeply. It was created so that if you visited each other in temple with the high priesthood that were running the coven present to manage the questions and manage the teaching and manage the energy. You came in, you did your work, you concentrated, you celebrated a bit, and you went home. And then you did not see each other. You didn't call, you didn't visit, you didn't go out with any first degrees, even third degrees in a coven that didn't run it would not interact with other covens or other members. High priesthood running covens could connect to other high priesthood running covens, but not members of another person's coven. So there was a lot of layers here about managing the energy socially. And I wanted to talk about that today and ask you some things about that. And then in general, we'll get to it. Some ideas and questions about dealing with the personalities and the energy of the other people. This is probably really true in occult groups, is because we know they start, they squabble, they fragment, people leave, new people come in. There's a tremendous amount of coming together and breaking apart in occult groups. And we want to try to manage the social context in the best way, in the most ethical, fair, just way, so that we can limit the problems. Do you think that's true and correct of the idea of the no socializing rule?
I think it is correct, and I think that it's important to think about these things, these particular cautious and very wise directives. I think that we need them if we want to continue in the way that we do. There's a lot of personalities in the craft. And of course, we are a fertility religion. So hopefully that fertility comes into fertility of the mind, and hopefully those people are a little wiser more than not. But there's a lot of the time that it's very difficult to manage. I mean, there is a phrase that Maxine says, and also Alex did, that witches are quarrelsome. And they are very difficult to manage when they are together, especially when they are together in a place where they begin to talk to each other and compare things. It's very difficult. And I had that experience in the Alexandrian network, as you know. When you put a bunch of witches in a place where they can't go anywhere but there, and they begin to talk about things, people begin to compare stuff, and they begin to say, well, what do you mean by that? And people always think that they are correct and the others are not, just because they have a direct line or a training that was given directly through Maxine or through Alex, and sometimes because they are loyal to their own teachers, and that's absolutely correct as well. But not if you're putting down the training of other people. It's very tricky when we come to these rules about, should we talk to each other? Shouldn't we talk to each other? Should we be exchanging stuff with each other or not? I think that in an era, and believe me, I began this in 2008, and the year a little bit early actually than that. I was doing podcasts in the internet, so I know how personalities work and what is involved in these things. And I think that my own experience on this, it is sometimes very difficult to maintain the substance of the craft when we talk about enormous amounts of forums, enormous amounts of discussions of groups of people exchanging stuff through the internet, which depletes actually this notion of training, in-person training, and the face-to-face when the training was done this way. And it still is, and I think that it still should be, and it shouldn't be done any other way. But I've seen a lot of times people exchanging things in the internet very freely, and it's really it's not as it should be, because it really drains that relationship between the teacher and the student, which should be and always happening, or somebody that is mentoring, between the mentor and the mentee. All of those things are very important in the craft, these relationships, these human relationships. I think the internet actually robbed us of that, and too much now. But I think that people are now realizing that we need a little bit of less digital and more analog in these cases. And we're returning again to this training that is human and in front of each other and in person. The other thing is very difficult to manage these dialogues. So we know that a third degree, for instance, or somebody that had attained the third degree, or a coven leader, can actually talk with other coven leaders, and that's fine. When I say coven leaders, it's coven leaders. It's not other members of other covens. It's just coven leaders. They should only be contacting other pairs, meaning not third degrees in general, but third degrees are in a coven and they're leading their coven. So they can actually talk to each other. Third degrees as well, they can talk to third degrees. But if the third degree, for instance, is in a coven, let's just say, because in our tradition, the third degree can stay in a coven. They don't have to hive off necessarily. If that's the case, then they shouldn't be talking with them about the craft. They're not the coven leader. They shouldn't be talking about what they do, what they don't do. Every coven is independent, and they should rely on what happens in the coven should not be divulged to any other person that is not a member of the coven. So it's a really kind of intimate space. First degrees, we know that they shouldn't be talking to each other, and they shouldn't be talking to any other members of other covens as well. And when there is a city, for instance, that we know that there is a lot of pagan scenes and pagan happenings and things like that, and talks and this and that. I'm thinking about London, for instance, with Treadwell's, and also with all of those wonderful stores, Atlantis, etc. There's a lot of people that go to these things. And of course, there's first degrees and there's third degrees and there's members of other covens and this and that. And it's inevitable that you would say, oh, I'm in a coven, or I work in a coven. And there's this pub thing that people go also. And it's when that happens, when you find yourself that you're first degree talking with another first degree, and they're in different covens, they should just talk about the weather or football or whatever it is that they should be talking about, and not really about the craft, because that will incur into the breaking of the rule of no socializing. They shouldn't be talking about any other covens or any other persons. Gossip about any other people shouldn't be happening. Gossip in itself is actually a killer of magic. So I think that people should just carry on with their own circles and thankfully shut up about others or what others do. It's very important also for us to talk about another thing that I think it should be mentioned, is that sometimes third degrees are alone. They have completed. They're not really in a coven. They didn't stay in their own coven. They just attained the third degree, and sometimes after a couple of years, they realize that there are material that they are missing, or they feel that there's probably something more that they don't really have the opportunity to learn from their own teachers. And it's totally okay for them to realize that. And I realized that actually myself, and you did too. You also did too. So this is an experience for both of us, actually. I looked for further training, which of course in the third degree is further training because the training should have happened. And this is further to the training that they received. And we do have this meeting of third degrees. We're going to do now our summer edition of the Alexandrian Conversations. And it's third degrees only. And it's about us talking very candidly and very sincerely about things that always concerns the third degrees that never come up, or that they don't have an opportunity to have talked about it to anyone else but other peers. So this is an opportunity because this is a group of peers that actually can accommodate that conversation, and maybe even this exchange will enlighten some pathways to things that are interesting and clarifying stuff that really has been a question for many decades now. So these are things that are very important because there's these groups of people. There are people with a lot of experience. They are third degrees, but there are different grades of experience, and that is a great opportunity for people to exchange ideas and perhaps even have some answers to questions that they have. This opportunity is, of course, very important because we don't really stop learning. What really is very important here to understand and realize is that most of the third degrees that I have been in contact with, they haven't had the opportunity to know how to develop themselves alone by themselves. This is a real problem because most of the time there is this idea that the third degree is the end of it. There's nothing else. You should have everything and you should be all set. Which in a sense it is true, but you should have the tools to actually continue further development of yourself and maintaining your own development, your own relationships with the gods, your own rituals privately. And very rarely you talk to a third degree that has done that or that is doing that, either doing their hermetics by themselves or they're doing their worship by themselves as well. Even if they have their own coven, even if there are leaders of the coven, there's always this thing that the third degree, I don't need to do anything because I'm a third degree. It really isn't true. And that just weakens the person, really, and their service to the craft because they don't really maintain their own relationship with either the gods or their own development in terms of inner work or development of their own spirit to evolve in a more private way. So there is this thing that we think that third degrees are the end of that, and there is no more to do, which is not true. So these meetings are very good because of that.
What I've learned from you, and I'm so appreciative for it, is your sentence that when you become high priesthood, you're serving the circle with more of your life, more of your heart, more of your soul, not less. So, I mean, I think there's a passion in the heart of a true witch, a serious witch and a serious occultist that won't let you stray, really. You know, you want to go to your altar every day. You want to pray and meditate. You want to be with the gods. You want to study and learn. You want to build hermetic pathworkings or trainings or teachings. You want to research and read books and learn new things so that you can digest them and decide, is it useful for my coven or not? Can I translate this into valid and important Alexandrian work or not? How can it fit in? Is it canon? Does it fit with canon philosophy? I want to go back to the idea of the soiree really quickly, just because we're thinking about meeting a coven or meeting leaders and then introducing having new people meet us. And this was done by Alex before Maxine also, when they were still in London coven, not just Temple of the Mother. So they would advertise a little meetup at a pub or a place, and everyone would drink a little wine. But the long-lived priesthood, the ones who have been doing it longer, would present a little bit of information about themselves and the groups, and then people could ask questions and talk to people in covens so that there could be some real exchange. I think that's a time when we really want to get to know each other's personality and hear, well, what do you do in your real life? Do you have a profession? Do you have family? Are you living in the country or the city? You know, what is your style like? I'm always really interested in people like that. I want to know about the personality, the ethics, the energy of anyone I work with magically. Wow, that's the most important thing. It's very difficult to relax in magic, trust in magic, really let your hair down when you're not comfortable with the people you're working with. So I think it's an important starting step, the soiree, to get to know each other and see if it's a good fit with the personalities. Because I think there are a lot of differences and the personalities have conflict, and then there's tension in the group, and that tension inevitably is going to go into the magic and dilute it. Too much gossiping, conversation, and socializing. We've said this before. It's like pouring juicy juice on a really good martini. It's just not a good mix, and it really does weaken the flavor, and I think weaken the magic. But also, if you thought about it in, let's say, 100 years ago, and you were really interested in shamanism or witchcraft or healing or anything, you would see a mentor in your community. You would know this person is a master. You would watch them. You would see them. Then you'd follow them around and you'd take them gifts and you'd open the door for them and you'd just beg for a moment of their time and hope that they would take you on as a student. But now today, like you're saying, with the internet, we've got everybody talking all day long. Do you really know their personality? Do you know their integrity? Do you know their ethics? Do you know their qualities of service? Often not until you've worked with them more than a year, or you can see them behave in the outer world. So I get the inclusion, and the secrecy helps the studies stay strong. Like your teacher should be guiding the group step by step, because the teacher's the overseer. They know what everyone needs to be working on, and the content is private. It's oath bound, but yet the public side has to come out so that we can see what's available and where we fit and who are our people. So it's a really fine razor's edge here between social and private. And that's what you're saying. And then Maxine, I think very wisely, has sort of created some operating procedures to help a coven navigate the social and personal dilemmas that can arise. I like the soiree. I love, and this has helped me more than anything, is meeting other third degrees that run their own covens. I during the Grand Sabbats we had some opportunity to talk with each other. But during Grand Sabbats, first degrees were there too, so you really were cautious about what you were saying so that you didn't disrupt, I won't say give away, but disrupt the pattern and teaching of the autonomous individual coven. And I do agree, total respect with a coven. You let their teachers and leaders do it, and you grant them their privacy and their authority. But if you can't go to a Grand Sabbat occasionally and you're in a small place, you don't see other covens. You don't see other Alexandrian covens. You surely don't have relationships with other coven leaders. It's easier today. And thankfully, in your efforts and others' efforts to kind of connect us, there's more opportunity to talk to the same level of teacher so you can share, I think for me, more than how to teach, not just the material, but how to teach it well, is what I'm so thankful for, and really love learning more from you and connecting to these other third degree witches. But it's a difficult world to navigate. We're not in isolated small villages. We all know each other. But you know what I saw the other day in my psychic mind were all these Alexandrian covens all over the world that are not online and don't say anything to anyone and are fabulous and powerful and just going about their day and their business, and we don't know who they are. And I think that's really powerful, don't you?
I think that's exactly where we should be. There is, of course, some people that have to be public. We are public. We're right here. And there was always somebody that was public, that was very public. the problem here is that people now want to be public for the wrong reasons, not the right ones. And so you said, you just mentioned, the privacy and the secrecy and all of that. Anything in the craft can be used to either further it or to corrupt it. And some people do use it to corrupt it. Because we don't know what's going on inside of a group, and sometimes it's abuse. It's psychological abuse. It's other abuse, actually, and it's very, very difficult to know for sure, because of course every coven is autonomous, again, for a good reason, but then again it will incur in these particular things to happen as well, so it would harbor abuse. However, I think that the best way is to really do what we're doing. Try to bring our own experience to light and what we know to be true and correct, and give our best advice, in when we talk about these things. And of course, moral and ethical principles are always good to have. Always good to help. I mean, really, this is a religion like any other religion. But I think that in all, the good will surpass the bad. I think that the good will prevail, and of course the teachings and the dedication and the vocations and the service will always prevail above everything.
It's one of my friends who listens to this podcast, who's not a witch at all, said to me the other day, she said two really wonderful things. She said, Ellie, I didn't realize Alexandrian witchcraft was a religion, but you and Kerrigan are really showing why it is a religion. And then recently I saw her this week, and she said, it's not so common that we blend extra ethical thinking with witchcraft. Like she says, the common mindset is that witches don't have ethics. They will harm or hurt, or they will do whatever is necessary magically, and they can often meddle and bind and restrict and harm. And she said, and you guys really talk against that. And I want to bring that up because I said to her, I said, well, the Alexandrian Temple of the Mother, and I have explained to her, there's some variation there. This is the creation of Maxine, as she further developed Alexandrian witchcraft, was heavily influenced with the idea of ethics. And it's a nice blend for those of us that believe in ethics and want to be helping the whole and the one and be good, and that it can function in witchcraft, and that magic and worship of pagan gods, yes, non-Christian gods, pagan gods, and do magic. You can get almost anything achieved with good magic. You can work around, you'll say you've got a really difficult person or problem. And if you're creative and inspired, you can still do ethical good magic to solve that problem. It does, and in fact, we probably all believe in karma. The more crappy you are, the more harm you do, the more gossip you spread, it's all going to sit back in your lap at the end of your life. You and the crocodile and the white feather. I love that she brought that up, and she felt very inspired, and she said it changed her mind about witchcraft as religion and witchcraft and ethics. A lot of us in the South are at least around a lot of Christianity, and you can't help but judge people by good or bad, well-behaved, poorly behaved, good person, bad person.
Well, hello, Ellie's friends, and welcome to the Alexandrian.
You know who you are.
I was listening to you and I was thinking about this, and it's very interesting what your friend has to realize. And this is one of the things that few people actually realize, and we don't really say it enough. We're not only witches, we're priesthood. And priesthood is a different thing, meaning we have an obligation of service because we're priesthood. So that makes the difference between what we see, for instance, in traditional witchcraft, which is normally done in a particular area or a particular country. I'm thinking about Cornwall, for instance, the particular magic and witchcraft that it's done in Cornwall. It's traditional witchcraft, so which is a mix between pagan traditions and of course folklore, and also some very old magic practices. So these are different because, of course, the witches in these particular regions, and I'm talking about Portugal as well, for instance, they really did serve the community in its whole, meaning they would serve money, health, and love. That will be the first three and the whole trinity of the traditional witchcraft service, which is, of course, they would do things to serve the people that would pay them because it was a way of living. It was very much intertwined with humanity and what we are. And sometimes we're not very pretty. So we need to understand this, that these people were servicing humanity in their own raw form, which is give me health, give me money, and give me a love. And this is the basic stuff. And of course, they can't have a very heavy moral ethics on here. You can't really have that because you will serve the good and the bad. A little bit like a lawyer, isn't it? Now that I'm thinking about it, you can't really. You have to defend also the bad guy.
Well, I think that I can see the group, kind of the tribe, the community coming together. Let's say an interloper comes in who really is stealing people's goats and raping the women and abducting the children. The tribe can come together and say to the witches, let's shut this down. We're not having this in our group. I mean, what's good or bad about that? I would say collectively, we can defend, stop, protect, and move that energy out of our space. Absolutely. Is it unfortunate that maybe they fall off a cliff and that's how we move them out of our space? Okay, maybe. But we would probably leave the room that they could go to church, be saved, and have their head blessed and change their ways. I mean, that's also a solution. So I think that we would be open to however it worked out. But I'm certainly not one opposed to putting our foot down when we're dealing with adversaries that are causing harm to the community. Absolutely going to step in when asked. I hardly would take that on by myself, but when people come and say, we're afraid, we need help, we need protection, I'll get right in there with the gloves on and figure out how to take care of it. Absolutely. But that kind of goes back to my idea too about the personalities and the people. In your ideas in a coven, how do we work out the dynamics of the interface of the personalities? Because we know some ladies are a little jealous, some men are a little egotistical, sometimes somebody wants to be the most magical or the most beautiful, and they cause a little ruffle amongst others. How do we deal with those dynamics within a group? And I'm sure that that goes to other groups, but in Alexandrian craft.
Well, they have to be told. They have to be told. And very clearly, you're misbehaving. You're really not doing what you're supposed to do. This is not about that. And I have called the attention of many of my initiates, and I had to tell them sometimes that this is not. You have to steer them away from what is happening, just to not really to correct them and to make the work for them, but to awaken their awareness to what is happening so that they can correct themselves, because hopefully you taught them well and they know how to steer away from it once they're conscious of it. Sometimes I just don't say anything. And hopefully I will just interject here and there. And I always say to people, I always say to my initiates, I always say to the coven members, I say, always be conscious of what is around you, especially when you're in a coven setting, because sometimes the priesthood can say something to you and it's actually a warning. And it's very gentle, but it is something that you have to be, if you're not conscious enough, it will just fly over your head. And now you're in mistake territory. You're making a mistake. And now you have to be you have to be told you're making a mistake. You don't want to get to that point. But this is the thing, Ellie. I think that it's very important to have a teacher. Those who do not have a teacher or somebody that is experienced, that is somebody that had been doing this for quite a while, then they are left to the hardest teacher of all, and a very cruel one, which is no teacher, which is life, which is the craft itself, by itself. And there is no mercy with a craft. You will learn either you want it or not.
It's true that Alexandrian covens are not democracies. They have a hierarchical structure. And some people have rebelled against that. And that's the idea that the teacher, the coven leaders, have been doing it a long time. We assume very well trained, lots of experience, and we're trusting them. We're putting ourselves in their hands, really, to lead the group properly forward in so that each person has their own development and the group develops. And it's not really a voting. The high priesthood says, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this, and I'm having this person do this job this time, and then this person, they're directing. Is there a way that, let's say, for instance, that you have a coven where you have maybe 2/3 degrees of priest and priestess, and they're running the coven, and then you have a lot of new people there, so you have the rest are first degrees. What would happen if all the first degrees are very uncomfortable with something and they want to bring it up or vote on something? Is there a mechanism for that or not?
They can talk. Nobody will silence them. One of our pillars is freedom. They can also ask to leave. They will just leave. They don't ask. They will leave. Anyone is free to leave at any time and any point. They have to write a letter to the high priesthood of the coven and say, just leave her. That's all. Sometimes high priesthood, they're a little bit egotistical or a little bit lost in their own belly button. They are missing is that without the group, there's no coven. There's no leadership to do. And this is something that sometimes people think that they are so high in their throne that they don't really understand this. It is true. If all of them leave, they are left with nothing. There's nobody to teach. There's nobody to advise or to listen or to do a ritual with, really. So
what's the name of that folk tale? The emperor's clothing, and he doesn't have any on. He's strolling around nude.
The naked kill.
And he thinks he's dressed in the most magnificent clothes, and his little fat tummy is sticking out. You can see why it's a difficult line to walk if the leadership doesn't have the real good ethics and moral code themselves.
There's power, freedom, and beauty. Freedom is one of them, and you can leave whenever you want to. Because one of the things that really Alex and Maxine brought in was this idea of freedom. And the reason why they brought this in, it was because they thought that an individual should come to the craft for love, because they wanted to, because it was their will, because they think that that's their desire, is to be part of this, is to be a servant of the gods and of the circle, and to learn and to be here. If they don't want to, because whatever it is happening in the coven is not really according to their own basic guidelines and moral, and they're not comfortable with it. I must say, the craft is not comfortable. The craft should not be comfortable, actually. But if they're really feeling that what is happening it's ringing wrong, get out. Nobody is keeping you there. There's nobody that can. And people sometimes they retaliate, or they think that they can retaliate, or whatever. There's no such a thing. It's not going to happen. And freedom. This is why we're Alexandrian. It's because there is this idea and feeling and action that you can leave anytime. You are here because you want to be, because your heart is here. If your heart is not here, or if you think that your heart doesn't belong here, go away.
That's the double-edged sword of the power of the training, because sometimes the lessons are very difficult and the student needs to stay and not run and hide. They need to stay and polish on their ego. They need to learn some difficult things sometimes. And I've seen people leave when they were challenged or felt personally embarrassed or called out. And I would say to myself, don't leave, stay and master this in your own personhood, But there's other times where I think maybe it's repeated or it goes on too long and then you realize it's not the right fit and you need to leave. But that's the sword, right? The power and the freedom. And you really have to walk that line with challenging yourself in the extreme, questioning yourself, working on your behavior, building your skills, looking consciousness over yourself, looking at how you're developing and you're behaving and you're contributing to the world. And then knowing that, so that's the tough side. That's the side that's scary sometimes and even challenging and embarrassing. And then the other side is knowing that you have the freedom to be autonomous and choose what's right and trust your instincts and go forth and do what you really need to do. But hopefully if you've been trained well, you have the power and the freedom and the beauty to do all the right things.
I'm not talking about the person is just hurt because the teacher corrected them or the teacher called attention to an issue that should be worked on and they're feeling attacked by the teacher. It depends on what really is. I mean, what I'm talking about is really very hard things to swallow. Activities within the coven. Of course, the teacher is going to teach you. You can't really leave because the teacher is teaching you, but you're going to leave if the activities at the coven or what is done in the coven is terribly wrong, or there's nothing, or it's terribly boring. Actually, some people sometimes leave because it's boring. But it's that's as offensive as anything else. You have to master the power. You have to master the freedom. And the freedom is thinking about staying because you want to. The beauty is how you conduct yourself in the world as well as in the circle. The service of the gods is the service of humanity. And that is what it is important. That beauty is there, has to be there in every aspect of the life. And then, of course, the power is, of course, the craft and what you do with it and how you deal with it and how you manage it and how you master it, which you never do. But there's techniques, there is tools, there is a lot of things that can help you do that. Freedom is one of the most important things in the Alexandrian tradition and always was.
I find that today I notice, and true for since I was really looking around to groups in the 80s, early 80s, a lot of people come to the occult group because they're lonely or they're looking for love life or they're craving social connection. So I really love the no socializing rule, which really puts a cap on that and says, if that's what you need, go somewhere else. Go to the pickleball club. Don't come to the Alexandrian coven because we're not going to do that. We're going to be teaching you to be a great individual human. We're going to be doing the great work. And you really do have to do that as an individual, right? We're going to give you the structure and the education and the opportunity to work ritual and work magic in synchronicity. But we're not trying to create a whole social world for you. We're giving you the opportunity to master a religion and be devout and worship and serve. And I think that's a really good message to send out to people. Is a good occult order shouldn't be the substitute for your social life. It should be your heart's passion that you want to learn and grow and serve, even if you're all alone.
Even if you are alone.